All right. Hi, everyone. We are excited to have Ruchika Sikri in the studio with us today. She's a San Francisco Bay Area based entrepreneur, venture capitalist, author, and former corporate leader whose entire post Google career has been devoted to a single mission: advancing mindfulness, compassion, and human flourishing through technology. She describes herself as a practitioner of compassionate innovation. Ruchika started her career at Microsoft in India before relocating to the US, joined Google as an HR analyst when it had around 5,000 to 6,000 employees, and over the next 15 years, she quietly built something extraordinary: mindfulness and well being programs that reached over 120,000 Googlers, powered by a volunteer facilitator network that she trained herself. I happen to be one of the students of Ruchika back from the Google days. She actually taught Search Inside Yourself to my cohort, and I still go back to some of the practices that she taught us. I believe she wasn't just running wellness initiatives, she was actually launching and planting a seed for something much bigger. After leaving Google in 2021, she founded Wisdom Ventures Fund, unconventional VC firm with a values first thesis, investing in mental health and human connection startups with a portfolio that now includes OpenAI, Anthropic, and Function Health. She co-founded Ready, a relationship platform built for people serious about growth, alongside the New York Times best-selling poet Diego Perez, also known as Young Pueblo. And last year, she published Brain Fitness Blueprint with Hay House, a book that weaves ancient wisdom with modern neuroscience into a 30-day framework for rewiring the brain. That's a lot of accomplishments, Ruchika, and I've known you for a very long time, and I can't believe this arc that we are discussing. Tell us about this journey. You spent 15 years at Google in a very corporate environment, and you helped build some of the programs there and launched into something that the corporate was still struggling with. Like, how do we make this sustainable? How do we make these jobs relevant and purposeful to the employees? What were you observing in tech at the time that made you feel that this work was urgent?
First of all, thank you so much, Shivam and Igor, for having me on the podcast today. It is such a pleasure and a delight to be working with you in this way. I know, Igor, you and I have had a couple of chats, and Shivam and I go long, long back from Google, and also some great personal friendship days. So it's such a pleasure to be just chatting with you today. I am equally surprised and, in awe of the journey that was presented for me to walk on. Essentially, I feel like I'm kind of this explorer of well-being for my own health and sanity, living in the Silicon Valley, working in tech for such a long time. Obviously, when we leave college, we're so excited about our career. And that was my feeling when I first joined Microsoft back in India. I'm like, how on earth I found my first internship at Microsoft. I come from a very small town, close to New Delhi, but had never thought that I would work at a big tech company as my first job. And that continued to, unfold the rest of my journey, and working at Google as well. But when I arrived at Google in 2006, I had a small daughter. She was barely 2 years old at that time. The excitement of working at Google, Shivam, you share that with me. There is just so much opportunity and so much to learn, such great people, obviously good food and all of the amenities that we were getting. And, we forgot like how to actually live life while working. We were living a great life at Google, but, there was no segmentation of like personal life from work life. I found myself working for 10 hours in office, coming home, quickly fixing like dinner, and then, while my daughter was still playing with her toys, like going back to work and fixing spreadsheets and coming up with models of how we will do calibration, performance reviews, and compensation planning at Google, because, we didn't have those kind of programs in place. And, I found myself quite affected by that pace. And obviously, like living away from family, raising a child on our own. My husband was also at Google at that time. So having really intense jobs resulted in some physical symptoms where I was like feeling heart palpitations. I was having a hard time like speaking up in meetings, or, making some crazy errors even at work. And, in HR, those errors can cost quite a lot. So I visited an on-site doctor, and she said, you're just feeling the normal stress and anxiety of working in a high-paced culture. Have you tried breath work? And I'm like I'm breathing all the time. Am I not? Like that's and she's like, no, there's this like box breathing. Like you can actually like, inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 6. And I'm like, okay. And then, later I found out that's called pranayama, like, which comes from like where I was born and brought up. And so I went into a discovery mode of like figuring out like how do I actually live a lifestyle that is conducive and can prepare me to show up every day for this intensity and excitement and the love of my work, and also be present for myself and my family. So I was walking in the hallways and I found, in building 40, like a sign that said, "We meditate here in this conference room for 20 minutes every day." And it was like lunch break. And I'm like, oh, I'm not that hungry. Let me just walk into this room. And I go in there and there are like these mostly dudes sitting, and, just waiting for everyone to show up. And I sat down on a couch. They were very welcoming. And someone rang a bell, and then everyone closed their eyes. I'm like, oh, I think I'm supposed to close my eyes. And for 20 minutes, there were no talk, no instructions, nothing. And I'm like, whoa, what did I sign up for? This was the most excruciatingly painful 20 minutes of my time at Google. I have no idea what was going on, and no one gave any instruction, but my thoughts were reeling. All of the sensations in my body were just pronounced because I think for the first time, beyond like sleeping, I actually sat down and I just rested. And this was like in 2007, I would say. But something profound happened. Like after that 20 minutes of experience and then chit chatting with the folks who were sitting in the room, I realized like the state we live in was not normal, and, we need to come back to the state of recovery in order to perform. And then I started attending some of the talks from the neuroscientists and monks who were coming and giving, education to us through authors at Google channel that we had. And it picked a lot of my interest. And then we had this engineer, Meng Tan. He wrote a book called Search Inside Yourself. And that became like a New York Times bestseller. And he was part of this meditation group that I was attending 1 or 2 times a week whenever I could find the opportunity. And then he started actually promoting this program as a workshop, just testing and experimenting. So I was like one of the guinea pigs to kind of go and test the program. It was really nice to learn about this intersection of neuroscience, emotional intelligence, and based on mindfulness practices, essentially. And it started shifting on how confident I was in my work, how balanced I felt, how I was mothering my kid, how I was a better wife, like to my husband, and also a better child to my parents. And that really inspired me to practice it more. Then I also found a yoga class happening in Palo Alto, like one of the yoga studios. Believe me, actually, it was a yoga teacher who was teaching at Google Daycare, and my daughter was going there. So her name was Jackie. And I asked Jackie, I'm like, Jackie, I would like to learn how to do yoga. And she's like, what? Like, you come from India. You don't know how to do yoga. I'm like, no, I've done yoga in my life before. So I started taking a class with this studio she was teaching at. And that just continued to unfold, my journey. And people started calling me Lavender at work for some reason. I started kind of, why? And they said, you just have this sense of calm and poise. And I felt like there was always so much going on inside me, but my affect around was actually adjusting to not be getting riled up in conversation, to pause and absorb, and also kind of curate an environment where we can make good decisions. And in 2013, to answer your question, like why tech companies supported this, we had a moment at Google. We were growing 3 times every year, like since I joined. And 2000, like when, we had gone from that 5,000 employee company to almost 75,000 employee company. That was quite a massive growth, and new departments were coming out, product areas were coming out, and they needed leaders from inside, and also teams to work better, to be more adaptive to when new employees joined from a different company, and coming with a different culture where Google wanted to protect their culture. So we noticed that in our Google Guys survey, the well-being scores were quite impacted. And I was kind of like this person who, was kind of known as this program manager who would take like a no program idea and put shape to it and launch it and scale it worldwide. So I did that obviously with the team, like a performance management system, compensation planning, citizenship rewards, like while I was an HR analyst and program manager role. And then I was also doing executive development for tech employees, like the programs like Edge and Leap and Jump. Some of those programs got created with a few leaders within tech and some HR leaders who were embedded in tech. And I kind of raised my hand to say, like, let's scale the Search Inside Yourself program. That Meng was an engineer. He was also a like teacher, but he wasn't a program manager, right? So he brought myself and Bill Duane, another engineering manager, basically came into people development and said, there are 5,000 people waiting to get into this program. The satisfaction scores are high. The effectiveness is quite high. The efficacy and NPS of the program was quite high. That's why we were getting all of these people on wait list. So then we put our heads together on how to scale it. And that's when like Search Inside Yourself started scaling. We got some budgets at that time, but we felt like there was so much demand that we cannot pay external teachers as much as we loved those teachers, that, we wanted to create a community of practice within. So that's when we created another program called GPause, where we would have volunteers who were meditating in their own time out of their interest in different offices raise their hand to say, I'm going to hold a meditation sit or an author at Google talk around mindfulness, neuroscience. And that's basically like how it started. We had 20 volunteers in the beginning, and we brought in this monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, who is very popular, and he's no more with us, but lives with us in spirit. And his teachings have been fundamentally transformational for me as well. And he came to Google. I remember when we launched GPause, there were 500 people in Charlie's Cafe. Everyone was just like, Charlie's Cafe had never been as quiet as that day, where everyone was meditating, eating mindfully. He stood up and then, went to the courtyard in the center, and everyone just kind of filed after him to do mindful walking. We sat in the courtyard, and bypassers were like, what is going on? Like, everyone is just sitting on the floor. So that was the launch of GPause. And lo and behold, I'll kind of shortcut the story that by the end of my term, I thought like this would be a 6-month project, like a citizenship that I could do. And then I'll have to figure out like either I find another job outside or stay at Google. It was quite a risky endeavor at that time, but I ended up doing it for 8 years. And we had 500 volunteers for GPause, 120 Search Inside Yourself teachers trained, 1,000 people had taken Search Inside Yourself by the end of my term. And the magic happened when COVID came, because everyone was so anxious. Everyone was working from home. Our GPause site leads, they were all around the world in 60 plus offices. So at the top of every hour, a GPause site lead will actually open up a Google Meet room and have a meditation moment or a connection moment. So it doesn't matter. You could be in New York City, anxious at 3 a.m., in your small apartment. You could dial in for a meditation and a group happening in Singapore at that time. Find that deep connection. So that human connection and the compassion, that's like how it started ingraining in my DNA a little bit, to see this is what matters at the end of the day. No matter what kind of a company you are, at the end of the day, humans need safety, connection, and peace in their life. So sorry, I said a lot, but then that was my journey at Google of establishing these programs, obviously with an amazing team and leaders who were always rooting for us and, giving us the support we needed.
Thank you for sharing that journey. And, of course, I've seen it from the sidelines, but to live it through how you explained it was refreshing in itself. There was an era when companies cared about this enough to actually have employees work towards these goals. I think that is long gone, but there are different interpretations of it that are coming up. I recall this moment when I became a people manager at Google. I had an onboarding doc for my employees, and it started with saying, go attend Search Inside Yourself because you will need it within 3 months of joining. And a lot of my new joiners would do that and come back and say, why did you ask us to go and do it first? It's like, because I did it later. And that was, it was helpful, but I wish I had done it earlier, because then you structure yourself in a very different way. So amazing work. What a way to find purpose with matching your lived experiences with the need of the company, of the corporate era in that time. And then somewhere came burnout. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. Nothing stays the same. It's such a good question. One of the things that mindfulness teaches us, and I have a hard time learning that, and I think most of us do, is this, the nature of impermanence, essentially, like nothing lasts forever. But when we love something, we find something purposeful, be it parenting, be it a job, be it a social volunteer work we do, we get attached to it. right? So my burnout was not from the intensity of work. It was not for any reason, but for the reason how much I believe that this work should exist and prevail and thrive in organizations. But as you noticed, and you're noticing more so, that organizations have to now redirect their time, money, and resources to things that affects the bottom line. And what ended up happening was that in our well-being learning team, we started kind of having cuts, on the number of resources that were available. And the organization was also shifting around us. So they had centralized all the way how the trainings were run as a central operations unit. So it doesn't matter if it's a nuclear training or a manager training or a well-being training, the operations were all kind of getting centralized for efficiency purposes. And same thing with, a lot of our volunteers were also asked to not, put in so much time in teaching. I mean, they were not told per se, but I think they felt the pressure of their core jobs were becoming so big that they could not dedicate the time. And I understand, Shivam, right? Like I'm now a VC and we invest in startup companies, and and I've run a startup like where every day it's like a new list of priorities, and every week like your resourcing strategy needs to shift. In bigger companies it happens at a slower pace, but I felt I had a long run with having, like when you kind of become an activist, like the activists actually hurt in their heart as well. And that's where like the activism also comes, because the anger or the conviction of like shifting a narrative, we need to be very mindful about like how it can affect us. So I think that's where my burnout was really kind of happening, because I got too attached on having the well-being team and programs run in a certain way. And I had to disconnect to realize like that my way is not the only way. I have good leaders around me who are also thinking about employee well-being. They understand how it affects the bottom line. If you're having absenteeism issues or presenteeism issue, the difference is people are not showing up at work because they're ill, or presenteeism is like when people are showing up to work, but they're not able to give their 100%. They're only performing at 40% level because they just don't have it in them. So I had to, and then, at that time, my mom was actually diagnosed with some really hard neurodegenerative disorder. So that was contributing to my mental health and physical health as well. And on top of that, like navigating the change and figuring out how do I adjust my role in it, all kind of came to bear. Typically the burnout happens when either the workload is too high, our sense of purpose is missing from work, or there is a personal change that we are experiencing, new parenthood, shifting places, having a sick parent or something like that. All of that kind of just really impacts it. So I wouldn't blame it only on Google. Like, I think I've had a run, in life, and maybe my body was just saying like, you got to pause and you've done your job, like shift back and then let things emerge the way they need to, because that's the nature of everything in our life. It will evolve, it will change, it will shift. But when we hold on too tight, then obviously it starts hurting a little bit. So yeah, that was kind of of my burnout, the first burnout at Google. And I've just had a recent second burnout, which I can talk about. Yeah, I'll pause here.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing your story. I think you're the perfect person to learn from. And you mentioned having that first burnout. Obviously, you just mentioned you had the second one. Can you tell us a little bit more about the recovery process? Because I think so many of our listeners might be going through burnout. Obviously, people working in tech at some point of their lives will go or already went through some burnouts. What is your recipe for recovery from burnout?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question, Igor. The first part is to be aware of it, when often we are aware of it. I'm sure you both have also felt tired in your bones and dejected, disconnected, frustrated, frustrated to not being able to show up like the way we want to show up at work. There are some great signs of burnout, right? Like which we can read about, and we feel it in our body. Awareness is like first step, acceptance is step number two. Like we are burnt out. Certain times, like the conditions of our life will actually bring more fear around acceptance that, oh, I got to pay my bills. I have this great job at this good company. How do I take care of myself? Let me just keep pushing harder and harder. But what happens is that there is actually this great book called Body Keeps a Score,
Right.
So even if our brain and our mind is saying like, no, no, rah, I can continue doing this, the body just gives up. And my sign of burnout was like, I would go into one of those phone booth rooms at Google and I would sit and I would want to press join the meeting and my hand wouldn't lift. My hand wouldn't lift, like, to connect the meeting because I was having either a conflict like with someone or I was like, just not, aligned with the work or my body was just too tired, And then the second sign of it was like, I would start feeling anxious, like entering the office. And then I would ask a coworker to go for a walk with me. So the first sign is awareness. Second is acceptance. When you are feeling like that intensity, then you are not being of great service to yourself or your work or your family. The third is to ask for help. Most of the companies now have policies around short-term leave you can take, mental health leave you can take, even if they cannot provide you a therapy program free, 12, at Google, when I was there, we had 12 sessions free in a year. So every month you can meet with a therapist and have discounted sessions, for the further support you needed. We had counselors on site. We had programs like what we did. But asking for help and, going to your doctor, meeting a therapist to figure out what's going on when your body is like responding in that way, and then talking to your manager, you're protected by law, by state, by the government. Take the break you need. Hopefully your relationship is good enough with your manager. You can go up to them and say, I'm not performing. I need like a week off with total disconnection. And then I think the agency lies within us. Like when we take that week off and someone is respecting that time for us, don't go on your laptop. Don't check your emails because, I'm not saying because we do it intentionally. Like as I wrote in this book, the neuroplasticity, the way we wire our brain, it takes time to rewire the brain to function differently. So if my wiring is to pick up my phone 10 times to check if there is a new message, Slack or email, it's not going to go away right away. It's like my muscle response. It's like a physiological response that is governed by our brain and habitual patterns. So, take that time like that you're away to maybe not do something. Like if you are an adventurous person, go like parasailing, paragliding, like just don't be near your computer, or have an accountability partner like your spouse, a friend who can just check in on like, who you trust. They're not like judging you or micromanaging you, to take that time. And this is especially true for managers, like if managers are burnt out and they tell their team like, "Oh, I'm going to take like some downtime and be away," and you go to a beach in Hawaii and then you take a laptop with you to check if your team is doing well. It doesn't set like good examples for your team. So those are some of the things you got to do. And, when you come back, like you need to recontract with yourself, before you come back. It's like no one is forcing. We're all free human beings, but we become prisoners of our circumstances and of the circumstances that we often create for ourselves. And sometimes there are obligations. I totally understand. So I think it's like the negotiation we need to do with ourselves. And with my second burnout, I actually am coming out from a 4 month sabbatical. And again, this burnout was like because I lost my dad now. Last friends was a big hard bolt like in my life. And when he passed away, I came back and I had to launch Ready into the World. It was a good excuse to numb myself, despite knowing that I need time to grieve. My team was very supportive. My co-founder was amazing. My tech team was awesome to support and take on a lot of work. But there's a sword hanging on your head as the CEO of the company, right? And we launched the product, June to August, I gave it all and we launched the product and we got some paying customers. But in September, I was in shambles. Like, it was like you're in a sprint. And when you stop, your body just like says, I can't do it. And I had the same signals. I would want to join my team meetings. I couldn't go. I could not get out of bed. I would have a lot of anxiety. And then I read this book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow, and when I started listening to it on my walks, like just in my backyard, because I couldn't even go for a walk outside, the sorrow was so deep, I realized like I was in grief and sorrow. And like I could have gone harder on my work, but when life events happen, then you can't, you're recontracting with life. Like what's my life without my parents? Like, I will never be able to pick up the phone and talk to them now, right? Like those kind of realization, I think we deserve to take a break. Our parents deserve, as the investment they made in us, the love they gave us, to hold on to their memories and really like journal, walk, remember, do rituals to make the passage for their passing and for you to reconfigure yourself, are like next in line, like, in the world. So those are some of the things I feel like we bypass it. And I've seen people actually like pick a tub of ice cream and get through grief and loss. We can't, like our body's not built for it. And no judgment for it. I really want everyone to have resources internally and externally available so that, we realize how important it is to pause and recover.
Thank you for sharing that beautiful story, and we are really sorry for your loss. And thank you for sharing your way of going through grief and loss. I also wanted to ask you about that transition that you made after 25 years in tech. It was quite a transition. You went from being a full-time employee in tech into well-being, but also in the world of venture capital. Can you tell us a little bit more what happened behind the scenes and how you ended up ending in the world of venture capital?
Surely. Yeah, it was a very serendipitous and exciting journey. So where should I start? So when I was like leaving Google, I had taken a transfer into Google Cloud team because they needed support with developing programs for EQ development of their managers, because cloud was kind of going through that just crazy growth that we experienced in early days of Google. And somehow I got misaligned to a project that was not what I was hired to do. And then I got COVID. It was 2020. There was no vaccine available. And both my husband and I got COVID. So did our children, but both of them bounced back because younger adults, have better resistance to it. And I've started feeling better, thankfully, in 3 weeks, and we survived. We didn't die. And then I was like, I was going to go back to work in 3 weeks, obviously online, not in person. And I said to myself, well, this is second life. What do you want to do? Right? Obviously, it's so hard to leave the mothership. Google is such a protective place. They give you such good paychecks, benefits, security, safety, like anywhere. If I'm lost on an island, they'll send a GSOC team member to get me, right? Like some of those things are really hard to leave behind. But I'm like, if I would have died, anyway, I wouldn't have had any of these. I think I went, it wouldn't have mattered. So then I'm like, 15 years is a long time. And, maybe this is life number 2. Like, how do I want to recreate this? So my first meeting with my manager, I didn't expect that. And I said, I don't think I can work at Google anymore. There's nothing wrong with you, nothing wrong with the team. The job is great. I will have a lot of agency on how I develop it, but I'm done. And he was so supportive of it. And he's like, yeah, I totally understand. I left Google in a month's notice. And then I obviously had built a really good network of friends and just heart-centered connection, I would say, with Soren Goodhammer, a few other people in the mindfulness space. Particularly I co-founded Wisdom Ventures, not just founded it by myself. It's a great team effort. So Soren runs a conference called Wisdom 2.0. He's been running it for now 15 plus years. And the idea of that conference is to invite Silicon Valley leaders on the stage and have a conversation about the direction of technology and how it's impacting humanity. So it's an intersection of wisdom, traditions, and technology evolutions. So Soren and I were just talking about, like, I left Google. He was also kind of exploring this project because he had like founder of Twitter, people from Facebook, leaders from Google on the stage, and monks and therapists and, the great neuroscientist on the stage to have this conversation. So he had a great circle of the people who we call wisdom mafia now, basically, alongside. So there was this inspiration to launch a fund. And just when I was leaving Google, because we had entered the COVID era, I was like deploying a lot of online resources for people to have well-being. So we had Headspace app available, Calm available. We were testing out some new products. So I was just noticing there's a lot of development happening in the well-being tech space overall. And obviously we didn't have Oura rings at that time. And, these headphones headgear that can actually read your brain waves and tell you what your state of mind is, and also launch off a meditation in your ear now to say like, okay, seems like you're overworked. Let me help you calm down. So just close your eyes and do a 5. I mean, there's technology has advanced quite a bit since then. So Soren and I were talking, and he said he and another partner of his were also contemplating launching a fund around it, launching an incubator or something. And I'm like, I've never founded a startup. I've never worked at a VC. But these are the moments when we start doubting ourselves, like, who am I to like create a VC firm? I was like a program lead at Google, or, just heading well-being and teaching meditation to people. How do I launch a wisdom fund? So anyway, I raised my hand and I'm like, I'll work pro bono. Let's just put a concept together. And it was great to like kind of put out a project plan and, like a roadmap of what we're going to do and collect information. So we had a couple of like long meetings in person with Soren, myself, Cecily Mack, who is a co-founder of and running GP right now for Fund 2, along with Soren and Bradley. Then we had amazing human Gus Tai, who is a 30-year plus VC in the Silicon Valley, and he's a meditator himself and teaches at Stanford. So he was kind of our sensei to like guide us on how to do VC while having these intentions of creating a world of technology that leads people to human flourishing rather than disruption. Mm-hmm. And the movie Social Dilemma had just came out to know the downside of technology in people's life. So all of that was just very inspiring to put the fund together. We said like, okay, let's just do kindly speaking to it as like an MVP fund. And we put out a call for people who wanted to invest in a fund like that, wealthy individuals, like-minded, aligned, and some institutional money. And we got the fund together. We ended up making 38 investments from Fund 1. And once the fund was closed and we were just screening companies, I ended up co-founding a company because I really wanted to know what is the founder journey. I felt like I got the best ice cream flavor in town, like because, I got into the VC space right away. But I wanted to, like, from the vantage point of having this compassionate aspect towards any work I do, I wanted to know, like, how hard is it to create a company? And it was such a delight to work with young Pueblo, who came and said, like, Ruchika, I want to create this dating company or a relationship platform where like-minded, intentional people who believe personal growth is a key ingredient to having healthy relationship, healthier families, want to kind of meet with each other and have a life together. And we found that the divorce rate in America at that time, and probably still is 67%. What happens when that happens? Families get all dismantled, children get affected. I think a lot of couples do a great job managing through the divorce, but many don't, And my calling really came when I read stories like of people when they have like this kind of, broken up families, like how that becomes such a trauma for children. And they grow up as dysfunctional adults, and they find dysfunctional relationships, and then they have this children. So this intergenerational thing was just quite calling for me to say, like, well, there are a lot of people meditating now. There are a lot of people who are attending workshops to know, like, search inside yourself or landmark forums. How do we, or going to Vipassana retreats? Like, how do we actually bring these people together to let them see if they can build a life together, raise better children, better citizens of the world, create a peaceful environment? So that was like my journey from like going from a corporate leading programs all the way to founding companies, and now meeting some amazing founders who are very well intended and working on so many aspects of well-being.
It's a quite the arc, I think, and we haven't even covered all of it yet. There is the book and more coming. Taking a pause there, Ruchika, how do you, when you run a company, you're now back in the shoes of those founders who are making those difficult decisions of shaving away some investments from employee well-being or retargeting them in different ways. And now you're in the same shoes where the bottom line does matter and paychecks have to be paid. How do you balance the compassionate innovation aspect against the bottom lines? And where do you see the challenge?
Yeah. It seems like they are two different things, but they're very intersectional, right? Like you can imagine from our own experience of like, when these last 4 months I wasn't feeling well, if I show up to a pitch meeting, I am bluffing myself and my team that I'm just there, but I couldn't like gauge whether this company is investable or not. I couldn't gauge, like give them good pros and cons of investment. So I just asked that I can't work right now, right? So But it's a good question on figuring out like how do you maintain a culture of compassion and well-being while also performing. That is the core thesis of wisdom ventures, right? We don't want, first of all, we want ideas that are actually helping and advancing the world towards betterment of humanity and our planet, rather than like bringing it back, 10 steps. The second is that since we are a venture fund, we promise our LPs a good return, and we have to make money on our investments. But we believe very firmly that, you don't need to make money by only doing bad things in the world. You should be making money while doing good things in the world and creating organizations that thrive in well-being. And obviously, that doesn't mean you don't have periods of intensity. You don't have periods of burnout. But do you have enough wisdom and ability to help yourself and your teams navigate through it? For example, in Wisdom Ventures and my Ready team, and even in my Wellbeing Learning team, I've been doing this for 15 years now, since I've been managing people and have been part of big teams. You always start with well-being check-in. How are you doing today? Even if it's a thumbs up, thumbs, for a straight or down. And then, like, not everyone needs to give the whole story of like what they're doing, but we often do. We make 20 minutes of our team meeting time, and we meet for 1.5 hours once a week. And then we don't meet like all the time. We're just doing work. That's our time. But the sanctity of that moment of like connection to know my dad is sick, I'm having these health issues. My pool has 3 cracks, and, the contractors, it's going to cost me like $10,000 to fix it. Like, you just share it like with the team, and they know that you're not living life in isolation of just doing the work. You have a full life around you. My kid has a baseball game. So some of those things really keep the human connection going. It's as simple as that. And, making room for people like when they are going through stressful times, right? Like, hopefully not everyone is struggling at the same time, but is your talent kind of, the word is not replaceable, but can people fill in the shoes? Like when I was the CEO of the company, I was not just the CEO. Sometimes I was the CPO. Sometimes I've not even done engineering. Like sometimes I had to think from an engineering hat by talking to engineers or like, CTOs who are in my friends network to say, how would you solve this technical challenge? Like put it out in a layman term. So the resourcefulness matters, for the leaders and for the employees of the company as well. Everybody is a leader of the work that you're doing, but also of your own health and well-being as well. So, like keeping those things in mind really help build a strong long-term culture of the company and give sustainability to the bottom line as well. I know at Google, I don't know where well-being learning programs are, but my friends who are still at Google, they feel the work pressure, but they still get free food. They still have gyms to go to. In my book, I talk about the well-being always rests at 3 layers. One, the organization needs to believe that it's important for the bottom line of the company to take care of their employees. Second, the managers and leaders need to actually follow through and provide not just the resources, but lead by example. If you're on a vacation, take a vacation. Don't check emails. Don't message people. Trust that they can handle. Third is on employees, ourselves. If there's a gym, there's pizza corner and there's healthy food available. Like if I keep eating pizza every day, no matter what Google does for my well-being, I'm not going to feel well, at the end of the month. So those are some of the dynamics I feel we need to also be reflecting on where well-being responsibility rests.
I'm going to tease out a bit of a provocative thread. It's something that I've been thinking a lot about on the machoism of tech, especially in the world of AI. It's all around us. It's just so much, the 996 or something that has come up, and just if you just look around us, there is just so much pride being taken into the number of hours people are putting in. I feel like consumerism of technology has taken a new shape and form, and it is taking us back, a few steps back in the journey where I thought after COVID and during COVID, people were realizing that your body matters, and body does keep a score. I don't know, in the last 2 years, there is this certain pride associated with burnout, right? The constant hustle, even leaders speaking very openly about the fact that I don't have vacations. Some leaders actually taking a step back and saying that this hustle is not for me, and them being labeled as like, well, this is the speed at which technology is moving and you're left behind if you don't. I'm curious, what is the temperature from where you are at in this world?
Yeah. I think I'm noticing a lot of hustling happening. When that happens, there are certain, like I have a theory around it. Like either, when I kind of dive into the ancient wisdom and I look at like what actually drives intensity in our life, what drives us to act in certain ways, right? Like there are three things typically, right? One is greed, second is fear, and third is love.
I'm surprised at the third one. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, and there is no race. I think we make that race in our own head. I'm going to be left behind. I felt those demons as well when 4 months ago I decided I can't do it. Yeah, I might be left behind. But then what was like driving me when I was thinking those two things that I'm going to be left behind. Oh my God, I don't know how to like use Claude to make agents. Actually, my book was just getting released at that time. It was quite a bit of a pressure that I can go on book tour. I can do, book talks and things like that. So it was also like, I'm like, oh, this 5 years of work I've put in, is it going for a waste because I can't get on the stages right now? Forget it. Like I can't even drive to Safeway right now. Forget about like getting on the stages. I had to talk myself. I had to like shift from that greed and fear mindset to love mindset, to say, I'm going to love my body because this body has enabled me to do this good work. And I would love my brain and my mind. And I would like to just spend time with my family watching random movies, just digging up some soil and planting some seeds. I have worked hard enough, and it is okay for me to not be part of the sprint or the marathon that people are always feeling. Now, is that a generic moment for everybody? No. Like some people had it in them. They had different life circumstances. I had different life circumstances. Like after I left Google, like I was just on it, pounding, like, okay, let's go build wisdom ventures. Let's go build ready. All right, we're going to write the book also. But not every moment in life is the same. But, I think each time people can drive us crazy around us, but we can actually pause and say, what's driving us right now? Is it like, and sometimes people have wrong connotation with greed. Like greed for making the ends meet is not greed. It's responsibility, right? Like I want to pay my mortgage, fill my fridge with food, take my kids on a vacation. This is why I studied hard and I work hard. And it's okay to have greed, and I'm going to continue working hard for it. Fear is like where, things kind of start. And there could be that fear thing that if I don't work hard, if I don't stay up with the sprint, like, I'll lose my job and all of those kind of things. I don't have enough savings. All of this is valid. People need to just really self-reflect. But if there is like that greed and, fear, it's kind of a dial. We can dial it up or we can dial it down to really like come back to reality. Fear, work with someone. A therapist can ground you, like your mind is kind of going all over the place. A friendly conversation can guide you into like groundedness also. But, I think, if we can keep going back to like, these leaders who are kind of maybe promoting that, they may love the work they're doing. And that's why maybe they're able to power through the burnout. Like, when I look at Jensen Huang or, like Sundar Pichai or someone, like, I don't see them struggling. I see their face is still glowing. They're still like living the moment. They're loving the work that they're doing, and they have the resources available and mental clarity available to do what they want to do, and more power and love to them, But I don't need to be one of them. I don't need to be an Elon Musk, right? Like to be. So I think it's a personal contract. Like we are contracting with ourselves all the time. So, this is the layer where we have the ownership. We have the freedom. I have the choice. I want to live in this house or live somewhere else. I have the choice. And sometimes if I don't have the choice, then, like that time also to know and practically assess that, okay, in 3 months, I need to go find a full-time job. Otherwise I'm going to dig too deep into my savings and I won't have anything left for my retirement. So those are some of the things that, we can always be kind of, moving around on this dial to kind of figure out what's right for us. Hard to do, but I've been a practitioner of it. I read a lot. And I try to practice. Now, there are 4 pillars of any shift and wisdom in your life. One is you get the knowledge. Second, you have to put that knowledge in the practice, right? Like you cannot just say, oh, I put it in my head and now everything will happen on its own. My stomach will get fed with good food. Oh, I know nutritious food and fiber is important. Protein is important. No, you got to put the hard work, put the practice, go grocery shopping, get good ingredients, make a good meal or find a restaurant that serves good food. Then you have to have the right community around you, right? Like, people who are like-minded, they believe in well-being and performing well and doing well in life, like however, whatever that concoction is for you. And then once you actually make the change in life, like this is where I come from. My impetus to actually do this work is because when I have the knowledge, I try to practice. Many times I fail and I practice again and I fail. And then I learn and then it gets hardwired in my brain. And then, I have a community of friends, like people I work with at Wisdom Ventures or, people I hang out with. They're all kind of like dabbling with this all the time, detoxing and hiking and eating well. And then I feel like, doing these podcasts and sharing or writing a book or, hoping to like launch a podcast sometime just to share the knowledge. It's in service towards bringing everyone together with you, essentially.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful story, and thank you so much for sharing it with us. I mean, just being in your energy field, being around you, and is healing, and I hope people can feel it in the podcast. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the book, so I think people are already very excited to learn a little bit more about it. So you mentioned investing 5 years of your life into this book. It is written with a neuroscience expert. You showed us the book cover. It looks beautiful. We are excited to know a little bit more about it. Can you tell us who is this book for and what is the book about?
Yeah. The book is for all of us. Maybe right now, I would say for more nerdy people, like, want to kind of dabble more with neuroscience, because Patrick really brings that punch into the book. So if you want to know and learn about the brain, and I think we need to democratize like brain knowledge. Like, we are doing a really good job as a society about elevating healthy eating habits, how important sleep is, how important mental health is, and movement is. But, all of this circuitry is happening with our brain. So I think having some ABC knowledge of brain is great. In fact, I was talking to my son this morning and I said, Nikhil, how about like we write a children's book on brain, right? Like what, the power of neuroplasticity, the power of learning new patterns. Like I'll give you a quick example, you can keep this or not, but there was an earthquake 2 nights before in Boulder Creek. We felt it here in Los Gatos, and it was 2 a.m. at night. And I woke up, bed was rattling. I was holding on to my husband for life. I'm like, oh my God. And then I suddenly remember, oh my God, Nikhil is in his room. He's 11 years old. I go to his room and, and he's not on his bed. And I'm like, oh, Nikhil, like, did you fall off Nikhil? And he's like, yes. And I said, did you fall off the bed because the earthquake came? And he's like, no. And then I'm like, he's like, I'm hiding under the bed because that's what you do when earthquake comes. And I'm like, damn, this boy woke up and he's like, knows what to do. And thankfully we have a bed where he can go under the bed. And, I realized the power of neuroplasticity in that moment. Every week, their school, the teacher puts on a slide on the screen that says earthquake. And they all have to go under the table. And if somebody doesn't go, they don't get candy that day.
No.
Okay. So it's neurocircuitry built. You hear earthquake, you feel earthquake, you go under the bed. That's like the power of understanding how brain works. So I think we all need to know whatever we feed our brain, the patterns, the habits, the information, we're all consuming news all the time, mostly negative these days. Brain is combust, by the end of the day. On top of that, we have to do our work. On top of that, we have to raise our family. On top of that, we have to clean the house. All of these things, it cannot handle it anymore. All of this is happening here. When this gets decimated, every aspect of our body will get affected. So that's why we actually put down the brass tacks on it to say it's brain fitness, woo-woo mental health, or, woo-woo meditation practices, where we highlight like what happens, when you do Tai Chi, when you do yoga, what's happening in the brain. So I've studied a lot of ancient wisdom, Buddhism quite a bit, and Vedic philosophy also. I've learned like from Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Patanjali Sutras. I've done 500-hour yoga teacher training. So, they take you really deep into the ancient texts and the practices when people lived well and they didn't have the ailments that we have today. because we lived with nature. So that's where there's this really fine balance of integrating modern science and ancient wisdom. So the first 3 chapters of the book are all about brain waves and hormones and things like that. And then, I designed the circle of vitality, which talks about the different aspects of our well-being: physical well-being, social well-being, emotional well-being, environmental well-being, intellectual well-being. A lot of people of our generation and living here, we want high IQ work. Otherwise, we start feeling depleted, because or we take it out somewhere else, right? Spiritual well-being, whatever. It's not you need to believe in God or something, like some people do. And for some, really connecting with something that is bigger than us. It could be the beautiful trees outside in our yard, right? To something more ephemeral, or an idol, or a prayer service you want to go to. All of these kind of things come together. And then towards the end, we talk about how well-being technology, like the investments we make, or even beyond that, like wearables, the headbands, and all of those kind of things can, if you are really into logical framework of entering this world of well-being, we provide that avenue too. So it's quite a good balance between the two aspects of it.
Very exciting. That's well, that completes the arc so far, but I have a very big hunch that this journey is going to continue into even more exciting avenues, Ruchika, with your resourcefulness, energy, and just the curiosity that is coming up in everything that you're talking about. I'm just observing this newfound sense of whoa, there's something to learn here, which is so refreshing. I hope you keep it alive and train all of us how we get there. But most importantly, I think I know why the term lavender came from, and I might just call you Lavender moving forward, because you definitely brought that effect today. We're at the tail end. This has been such a fantastic conversation, and I think this could be a very long form podcast too. So maybe that's something you should think about, Ruchika, as launching a long form podcast on these topics, because there's so much to unfurl and so much to unfold. You have a fascinating book. We'll definitely put the link where to buy it. With the podcast. Good luck with Wisdom Ventures and Ready. For all the listeners out there who are still seeking their soulmates, give Ready a chance. I think if you're ready, then Ready is ready. And thank you so much for spending this time with us and sharing. As you move on to spreading more light in the world, where is your energy directed next? I'm curious about that.
Well, to be honest, I haven't quite figured that out, but I have a lot to, give right now and to receive. I'm just trying to be, before my son goes into his teenage years, happening very soon, I want to spend some real good quality time with him, go on vacations. And I have a really good team at Wisdom Ventures, and I want to continue contributing to making this world a better place, from the investments we make, how we support the founders, how we support each other and our mission and vision. So I'm just staying with that right now. I do want to start writing and, bringing in more. I've learned so much from people around me, and, even just talking to both of you has been so insightful for me. Otherwise, it's all in you, and you have done such an amazing job bringing it out also, which makes me feel more inspired to continue doing the good work, maybe write Substack articles or host some podcasts, so we can continue enriching each other's life with knowledge that can be put into practice.
Very true. Very true. Well, it was fantastic. I'm sure the listeners will love it. And I am also sure that we'll bring you back to share more wisdom as we go through our own podcast arc. Thank you so much, Ruchika.